Chapter 17 of Etiquette, Balls and Dances, Part 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Micah Lebishak. Etiquette in Society, in Business, in Politics, and at Home, by Emily Post. Chapter 17, Balls and Dances, Part 2. Distinction vanished with cotillion. The glittering display of tinsel satin favors that used to be the featured and gayest decoration of every ballroom is gone. The cotillion leader, his hands full of seat checks, his manners a cross between those of Lord Chesterfield and a traffic policeman, is gone, and much of the distinction that used to be characteristic of the ballroom is gone with the cotillion. There is no question that a cotillion was prettier to look at than a mob scene of dancers crowding each other for every few inches of progress. The reason why cotillions were conducive to good manners was that people were on exhibition, where now they are unnoticed components of a general crowd. When only a sixth, at most, of those in the room danced, while others had nothing to do but watch them, it was only natural that those on exhibition should dance as well as they possibly could. And since their walking across the room and asking others to dance by offering a favor was also watched, grace of deportment and correct manners were not likely to deteriorate either. The cotillion was detested and finally banned by the majority who wanted to dance ceaselessly throughout the evening, but it was of particular advantage to the very young girl who did not know many men, as well as to what might be called the helpless type. Each young girl, if she had a partner, had a place where she belonged, and where she sat throughout the evening, and since no couple could dance longer than the few moments allowed by the figure, there was no chance of anyone's being stuck, so that the average girl had a better chance of being asked to dance than now, when, without programs and without cotillions, there is nothing to relieve the permanency of a young man's attachment to an unknown young girl once he asks her to dance. The ordeal by ballroom. Instead of being easier, it would seem that time makes it increasingly difficult for any but distinct successes to survive the ordeal by ballroom. Years ago a debutante was supposed to flutter into society in the shadow of mamma's protecting amplitude. Today she is packed off by herself, and with nothing to relieve her dependence upon whoever may come near her. To liken a charming young girl in the prettiest of frocks to a spider is not very courteous, and yet the role of spider is what she is forced by the exigencies of ballroom etiquette to play. She must catch a fly, meaning a trousered companion, so as not to be left in placarded disgrace, and having caught him, she must hang on to him until another takes his place. There should be drastic revision of ballroom customs. There is a desperate need of what in local dancing classes was called the dump, where without rudeness a gentleman could leave a lady as soon as they had finished dancing. There used to be a chaperon into whose care a young girl could be committed. There used to be the dance card, or programme, still in vogue at public balls, that allotted a certain dance to a certain gentleman and lady equally. There used to be the cotillion, which, while cruel, at least committed its acts of cruelty with merciful dispatch. When the cotillion began, the girl who had no partner went home. She had to. Now, once she has acquired a companion, he is planted beside her until another takes his place. It is this fact, and no other, which is responsible for the dread that the average young girl feels in facing the ordeal of a ballroom, and for the discourteous unconcern shown by dancing men who, under other conditions, would be friendly. The situation of a young girl left cruelly alone draws its own picture, but the reason for the callous and ill-mannered behavior of the average dancing man may perhaps need a word of explanation. For instance, Jim Smartlington, when he was a senior at college, came down to the Toplofty's ball on purpose to see Mary Smith. Very early, before Mary arrived, he saw a Miss Blank, a girl he had met at a dinner in Providence, standing at the entrance of the room. Following a casual impulse of friendliness, he asked her to dance. She danced badly. No one cut in, and they danced and danced, sat down, and danced again. Mary arrived. Jim walked Miss Blank near the stag line and introduced several men, who bowed and slid out of sight with the dexterity of eels who recognized a hook. From 10:30 until supper at 1:30, Jim was planted. He was then forced to tell her he had a partner for supper, and left her at the door of the dressing-room. There was no other place to leave her. He felt like a brute and a cad, even though he had waited nearly 3 hours before being able to speak to the girl he had come purposely to see. There really is something to be said on the man's side, especially on that of one who has to get up early in the morning, and who, only intending to see 1 or 2 particular friends and then go home, is forced because of an impulse of courtesy not only to spend an endless and exhausting evening, but to be utterly unfit for his work next day. One is equally sorry for the girl. But in the example above, her stupid handling of the situation not only spoiled one well-intentioned man's evening, but completely finished herself so far as her future chances for success were concerned. Not alone her partner, but every brother stag who stood in the doorway mentally placarded her, "Keep off." It is suicidal for a girl to make any man spend an entire evening with her. If at the end of 2 dances there is no intimate friend she can signal to, or an older lady she can insist on being left with, she should go home, and if the same thing happens several times, she should not go to balls. For the reasons given above, there is little that a hostess or host can do, unless a promise of release is held out, and that in itself is a deplorable situation, a humiliation that no young girl's name should be submitted to. And yet there it is. It is only necessary for a hostess to say, "I want to introduce you to a charming," and she is already speaking to the air. Boston hostesses solve the problem of a young girl's success in a ballroom in a way unknown in New York, by having the ushers. Ushers. Each hostess chooses from among the best-known young men in society who have perfect address and tact, a number to act as ushers. They are distinguished by white boutonnieres, like those worn by ushers at a wedding, and they are deputy hosts. It is their duty to see that wallflowers are not left decorating the seats in the ballroom, and it is also their duty to relieve a partner who has too long been planted beside the same rosebud. The ushers themselves have little chance to follow their own inclinations, and unless the honor of being chosen by a prominent hostess has some measure of compensation, the appointment, since it may not be refused, is a doubtful pleasure. An usher has the right to introduce anyone to anyone without knowing either principal personally, and without asking any lady's permission. He may also ask a lady, if he has a moment to himself, to dance with him, whether he has ever met her or not, and he can also leave her promptly, because any stag called upon by an usher must dance. The usher in turn must release every stag he calls upon by substituting another, and the second by a third, and so on. In order to make a ball go, meaning to keep everyone dancing, the ushers have on occasions to spend the entire evening in relief work. At a ball where there are ushers, a girl standing or sitting alone would at once be rescued by one of them, and a rotation of partners presented to her. If she is hopeless, meaning neither pretty nor attractive nor a good dancer, even the ushers are in time forced to relieve her partners and take her to a dowager friend of the hostess, beside whom she will be obliged to sit until she learns that she must seek her popularity otherwhere than at balls. On the other hand, on an occasion when none of her friends happen to be present, the greatest belle of the year can spend an equally deadly evening. The dance program. The program or dance card of public balls and college class dances has undeniable advantages. A girl can give as many dances as she chooses to whomever she chooses, and a man can be sure of having not only many, but uninterrupted dances with the one he most wants to be with, provided she is willing. Why the dance card is unheard of at private balls in New York is hard to determine, except that fashionable society does not care to take its pleasure on schedule. The gilded youth likes to dance when the impulse moves him. He also likes to be able to stay or leave when he pleases. In New York there are often 2 or 3 dances given on the same evening, and he likes to drift from one to the other, just as he likes to drift from one partner to another, or not dance at all if he does not want to. A man who writes himself down for the 10th jazz must be eagerly appearing on the stroke of the first bar, Or if he does not engage his partners busily at the opening of the evening, he cannot dance at all. He may not want to, but he hates not being able to. So again we come back to the present situation and the problem of the average young girl, whose right it is, because of her youth and sweetness, to be happy and young, and not to be terrified, wretched, and neglected. The one and only solution seems to be for her to join a group. The flock system of the wise fledglings. If a number of young girls and young men come together, better yet, if they go everywhere together, always sit in a flock, always go to supper together, always dance with one another, they not only have a good time, but they are sure to be popular with drifting odd men also. If a man knows that having asked a girl to dance, one of her group will inevitably cut in, he is eager to dance with her. Or if he can take her to the others, when they have danced long enough, he is not only delighted to be with her for a while, but to sit with her and the others off and on throughout that and every other evening, because since there are always some of them together, he can go again the moment he chooses. Certain groups of clever girls sit in precisely the same place in a ballroom, to the right of the door, or the left, or in a corner. One might almost say they form a little club. They dance as much as they like, but come back home between whiles. They all go to supper together, and whether individuals have partners or not is scarcely noticeable, nor even known by themselves. No young girl, unless she is a marked favorite, should ever go to a ball alone. If her especial flock has not as yet been systematized, she must go to a dinner before every dance, so as to go and stay with a group. If she is not asked to dinner, her mother must give one for her, or she must have at least one dependable beau, or better, two, who will wait for her and look out for her. Maid goes with her. A young girl who goes to a ball without a chaperone, meaning of course a private ball, takes a maid with her, who sits in the dressing-room the entire evening. Not only is it thought proper to have a maid waiting, but nothing can add more to the panic of a partnerless girl than to feel she has not even a means of escape by going home. She can always call a taxi as long as her maid is with her, and go. Otherwise she either has to stay in the ballroom, or sit forlorn among the visiting maids in the dressing-room. What makes a young girl a ballroom success? Much of the above is so pessimistic, one might suppose that a ballroom is always a chamber of torture, and the young girl taken as an example above, a very drab and distorted caricature of what a real young girl should be and is. But remember, the young girl who is a belle of the ballroom needs no advice on how to manage a happy situation, no thought spent on how to make a perfect time better. The ballroom is the most wonderful stage setting there is for the girl who is a ballroom success, and for this especial talents are needed just as they are for art or sport or any other accomplishment. The great ballroom success, first and foremost, dances well. Almost always she is pretty. Beauty counts enormously at a ball. The girl who is beautiful and dances well is, of course, the ideal ballroom belle. But, this for encouragement, these qualities can, in a measure, at least be acquired. All things being more or less equal, the girl who dances best has the most partners. Let a daughter of Venus or the heiress of Midas dance badly, and she might better stay at home. To dance divinely is an immortal gift. But to dance well can, except in obstinate cases, as the advertisements say, be taught. Let us suppose, therefore, that she dances well, that she has a certain degree of looks, that she is fairly intelligent. The next most important thing, after dancing well, is to be unafraid, and to look as though she were having a good time. Conversational cleverness is of no account in a ballroom. Some of the greatest belles ever known have been as stupid as sheep, but they have had happy dispositions and charming and unself-conscious manners. There is one thing every girl who would really be popular should learn. In fact, she must learn: self-unconsciousness. The best advice might be to follow somewhat the precepts of mental science, and make herself believe that a good time exists in her own mind. If she can become possessed with the idea that she is having a good time, and look as though she were, the psychological effect is astonishing. Cutting in. When one of the stags standing in the doorway sees a girl dance past whom he wants to dance with, he darts forward, lays his hand on the shoulder of her partner, who relinquishes his place in favor of the newcomer, and a third in turn does the same to him, or the one who was first dancing with her may cut in on the partner who took her from him, after she has danced once around the ballroom. This seemingly far from polite maneuver is considered correct behavior in best society in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, and therefore most likely in all parts of America, not in London nor on the Continent. At dances organized during the war in the canteens for soldiers and sailors on furlough, the men refused to cut in because they thought it was rude, and undoubtedly it is, except that custom has made it acceptable. If, however, it still seems rude to the young men of other town to cut in, then they should not do so. Sitting out dances. On the other hand, if a girl is sitting in another room, or on the stairs with a man alone, a second one should not interrupt, or ask her to dance. If she is sitting in a group, he can go up and ask her, "Don't you want to dance some of this?" She then either smiles and says, "Not just now, I am very tired," or, if she likes him, she may add, "Come and sit with us." To refuse to dance with one man, and then immediately dance with another, is an open affront to the first one, excusable only if he was intoxicated, or otherwise actually offensive, so that the affront was both intentional and justifiable. But under ordinary circumstances, if she is dancing, she must dance with everyone who asks her. If she is not dancing, she must not make exceptions. An older lady can very properly refuse to dance, and then perhaps dance briefly with her son or husband, without hurting her guest's proper pride. But having refused to dance with one gentleman, she must not change her mind and dance later with another. A young girl who is dancing may not refuse to change partners when another cuts in. This is the worst phase of the cutting-in custom. Those who particularly want to dance together are often unable to take more than a dozen steps before being interrupted. Once in a while a girl will shake her head no to a stag who darts toward her, but that is considered rude. A few others have devised dancing with their eyes shut as a signal that they do not want to be cut in on. But this is neither customary nor even a generally known practice. It is always the privilege of the girl to stop dancing. A man is supposed to dance on until she or the music stops. Asking for a dance. When a gentleman is introduced to a lady, he says, "May I have some of this?" or "Would you care to dance?" A lady never asks a gentleman to dance, or to go to supper with her, though she may if she is older, or if she is a young girl who is one of a flock, she may say, "Come and sit at our table." This, however, would not imply that in sitting at their table he is supposed to sit next to her. In asking a lady to go to supper, a gentleman should say, "Will you go to supper with me?" or "May I take you to supper?" He should never say, "Have you a partner?" as she is put in an awkward position in having to admit that she has none. A ball is not a dancing school. Since a girl may not without rudeness refuse to dance with a man who cuts in, a man who does not know how to dance is inexcusably inconsiderate if he cuts in on a good dancer, and compels a young girl to become instructress for his own pleasure with utter disregard of hers. If at home or elsewhere a young girl volunteers to teach him, that is another matter. But even so, the ballroom is no place to practice, unless he is very sure that his dancing is not so bad as to be an imposition on his teacher. Novelties and innovations. Formal occasions demand strict conventions. At an important wedding, at a dinner of ceremony, at a ball, it is not only bad form, but shocking to deviate from accepted standards of formality. Surprise is an element that must be avoided on all dignified occasions. Those, therefore, who think it would be original and pleasing to spring surprises on their guests at an otherwise conventional and formal entertainment, should save their ideas for a children's party, where surprises not only belong, but are delightedly appreciated. To be sure, one might perhaps consider that scenic effects or unusual diversions, such as one sees at a costume ball or a period dinner, belong under the head of surprise. But in the first place, such entertainments are not conventional, and in the second, details that are in accordance with the period or design of the ball or dinner are conventions after all. On the other hand, in the country especially, nothing can be more fun or more appropriate than a barn dance, or an impromptu play or a calico masquerade, with properties and clothes made of any old thing, and in a few hours, even in a few minutes. Music need not be an orchestra, but it must be good, and the floor must be adequate and smooth. The supper is of secondary importance. As for manners, even though they may be unrestrained, they can be meticulously perfect for all that. There is no more excuse for rude or careless or selfish behavior at a picnic than at a ball. Public balls. A public ball is a ball given for a benefit or charity. A committee makes the arrangements, and tickets are sold to the public, either by being put on sale at hotels or at the house of the secretary of the committee. A young girl of social position does not go to a public ball without a chaperone. To go in the company of one or more gentlemen would be an unheard-of breach of propriety. Subscription dances and balls. These are often of greater importance in a community than any number of its private balls. In Boston and Philadelphia, for instance, a person's social standing is dependent upon whether or not she or he is invited to the assemblies. The same was once true in New York, when the Patriarch and Assembly balls were the dominating entertainments. In Baltimore, too, a man's social standing is non-existent if he does not belong to the Monday Germans, and in many other cities membership in the subscription dances or dancing classes or sewing circles distinctly draws the line between the inside somebodies and the outside nobodies. Subscription dances such as these are managed, and all invitations are issued by patronesses who are always ladies of unquestioned social prominence. Usually these patronesses are elected for life, or at least for a long period of years. When for one reason or another a vacancy occurs, a new member is elected by the others to fill her place. No outsider may ever ask to become a member. Usually a number of names are suggested and voted on at a meeting, and whoever wins the highest number of votes is elected. The expenses of balls such as assemblies are borne by the patronesses collectively, but other types of dances are paid for by subscribers who are invited to take tickets, as will be explained. How subscription dances are organized. Whether in city, town, or village, the organization is the same. A small group of important ladies decide that it would be agreeable to have 2 or 3 balls, or maybe only one, a season. This original group then suggests additional names until they have all agreed upon a list sufficient in size to form a nucleus. These then are invited to join, and all of them at another meeting decide on the final size of the list and whom it is to include. The list may be 100, or it may stay at the original group of a half-dozen or so. Let us, for example, say the complete list is 50. 50 ladies, therefore, the most prominent possible, are the patronesses, or managers, or whatever they choose to call themselves. They also elect a chairman, a vice-chairman, a secretary, and a treasurer. They then elect 7 or 8 others who are to constitute the managing committee. The other 38 or 40 are merely members, who will pay their dues and have the right to a certain number of tickets for each of the balls. These tickets, by the way, are never actually sent by the members themselves, who merely submit the names of the guests they have chosen to the Committee on Invitations. This is the only practical way to avoid duplication. Otherwise, let us say that Mrs. Oldname, Mrs. Worldly, Mrs. Norman, and Mrs. Gilding each send their 2 tickets to the young Smartlingtons, which would mean that the Smartlingtons would have to return 3, and those 3 invitations would start off on a second journey, perhaps to be returned again. On the other hand, if each patroness sends in a list, the top names which have not yet been entered in the invitation book are automatically selected, and the committee notify her to whom her invitations went. There is also another very important reason for the sending in of every name to the committee: exclusiveness. Otherwise the balls would all too easily deteriorate into the character of public ones. Every name must be approved by the Committee on Invitations, who always hold a special meeting for the purpose, so that no matter how willing a certain careless member would be to include Mr. and Mrs. Unsuitable, she is powerless to send them tickets if they are not approved of. As a matter of fact, there is rarely any question of withholding invitations, since a serious objection would have to be sustained against one to warrant such an action on the part of the committee. Number of invitations issued. With 50 members, each might perhaps be allowed, besides her own ticket, 2 ladies' invitations and 4 gentlemen's. That would make 350 invitations available altogether. The founders can, of course, decide on whatever number they choose. Patronesses can also exchange tickets. One who might want to ask a double number of guests to the first assembly can arrange with another to exchange her second assembly invitations for first ones. Also, it often happens that the entire list sent in by a member has already been included, and not wanting to use her tickets, she gives them to another member, who may have a debutante daughter and therefore be in need of extra ones. Bachelor balls, like the Monday Germans of Baltimore, are run by the gentlemen instead of the ladies. Otherwise, they are the same as the assemblies. Other forms of subscription dances. Other forms are somewhat different in that instead of dividing the expenses between members who jointly issue invitations to few or many guests, the committee of 10, we will say, invites either all the men who are supposed to be eligible or all the young girls to subscribe to a certain number of tickets. For instance, dances known usually as junior assemblies or the holiday dances are organized by a group of ladies, the mothers usually of debutantes. The members of the organization are elected just as the others are, for life, but they are apt, after a few years, when their daughters are too old, to resign in favor of others whose daughters are beginning to be grown. The debutantes of highest social position are invited to become members. Each one pays dues, and has the privilege of asking 2 men to each dance. Mothers are not expected to go to these dances unless they are themselves patronesses. Sometimes young women go to these dances until they marry. Often they are for debutantes, but most often they are for girls the year before they come out, and for boys who are in college. Patronesses receive. At a subscription dance where patronesses take the place of a hostess, about 4 of these ladies are especially selected by the ball committee to receive. They always stand in line and bow to each person who is announced, but do not shake hands. The guest arriving also bows to the hostesses collectively, not 4 times. A lady, for instance, is announced. She takes a few steps toward the receiving line and makes a slight curtsy. The ladies receiving make a curtsy in unison, and the guest passes on. A gentleman bows ceremoniously, the way he was taught in dancing school, and the ladies receiving incline their heads. End of Chapter 17, Balls and Dances, Part 2. Recording by Michael Abishak.